In this movie review segment of the First Response, we're going to be talking about X-Men Origins Wolverine. There's two perspectives that you can review this movie from. One is from a more popular perspective, people who are not familiar with the source material, and the other is people who are familiar with the comics and the characters and the TV show, and that's the perspective I'm going to be speaking from. I have tried to divorce myself from my childhood in this sense, but I just can't. I was practically raised on the X-Men TV show and the characters and everything like that. So when I'm watching a movie, I whether I like it or not, have certain expectations. And I think the producers of the film know this stuff. So they do reference and study the source material, and we'll talk a little bit about how that sort of plays into the enjoyment or the lack of enjoyment of this Wolverine movie. So first and most importantly, what's Wolverine and who is he? Very briefly, he's based off of course, the Wolverine animal, is sort of the analogy that's drawn. Wolverine animals, for those of you who don't know, are very small, very fierce, sharp claws, sharp teeth, very agitated. They have a reputation for attacking things bigger than they are. They're primarily found up north, largely in Canada, similar to our Wolverine character. A lot of his storyline takes place in Canada. In the comics, he's only about 5'3". He's very muscular. He's very fierce. He has no recollection of his history or where he's from or who he is, which makes him a very interesting character, almost like kind of a born supremacy type thing. He doesn't know who to trust, so he doesn't trust anybody. He's a renegade. He's a rebel. He's a very interesting character. We also have to talk about his mutant powers. He's somebody that has incredible regenerative abilities. He can heal very well. If he's cut right in front of you, he will heal. He also is very slow to age. He has incredible senses, particularly sense of smell. And for really the first 20 years of the Wolverine franchise, that's really pretty much what we knew about him. We also knew that he had these metal claws that came out of his arms. As the comics move on, and this is, by the way, very important because this is the storyline that the Wolverine movie takes place. It's an origin movie, so there is a certain loyalty that they have to the source material. Wolverine underwent this very serious surgery from the United States military. They were trying to make him into a Weapon X to be more specific. Because he has these incredible healing abilities, they were going to cut him open and graft this unbreakable metal called adamantium to his bones to make him even a more effective weapon. It was never really discussed, although most people assumed that the claws that he had were part of this weaponization process. It makes perfect sense. He's going to be a weapon, so he needs some sort of attacking mechanism, and so it was just assumed that they had installed these claws into his body because he could withstand the pain and all this stuff. There's something important to note here. I think a lot of people who have seen the Wolverine movie are very hard on the bone claws issue because in the beginning of the film, Wolverine has these bone claws. I think part of the frustration is that people... Now, I want to be clear because in a second I'm going to describe how this really isn't the movie's fault, but I do want to describe how I think that people have reacted negatively to the bone claws because we're already in an area of suspended disbelief, right? We're expected to believe that humans have continued to evolve very quickly all of a sudden. All of a sudden there's an evolution of teleportation or telekinesis or optic blasting or all of these different things. In Wolverine's case, very quick healing. I think if you're going to hold people in that dimension of disbelief, you have to keep it at least, I know it's a comic, but it's kind of fun, I think, to keep it kind of realistic. If you give one character a mutation of, really, really quick healing abilities, super senses, agility and a little bit of extra strength and bone claws, it's just kind of like, wow, this guy evolved a lot, even more than the other mutants. I think I think there's something very interesting about the Wolverine character having, the Weapon X character having this military installation of these claws. But here's where I'm going to describe how the bone claws, although it does not seem to be very popular, especially with the fans, is really not the movie's fault. In X-Men, the second series, issue 25, this was based off of a joke that some of the writers were having. They said, well, look, Magneto, which is another one of the characters, can control all of the, he's a big magnet, basically. He can control metallic objects. And Wolverine has this metal in his body. Why doesn't Magneto just rip the metal out of Wolverine? So in issue 25, this is exactly what happens. And that's when we're sort of revealed that Wolverine has these bone claws. So it's really not the movie that added the bone claws. I mean, the Marvel Universe added the bone claws, and I think a lot of the fans were kind of disappointed at that time. Unfortunately, Marvel has sort of this tradition and history of taking perfectly good characters and throwing things in there that frankly kind of mess them up. I mean, look at Spider-Man, for example. Spider-Man is somebody that was bitten by a radioactive spider, and now they have this spider sense and these different spider abilities. Well, according to the comics, we find out that Spider-Man just has these web cartridges. They're actually machines that, take web, packs and everything like that, and that's how he's able to shoot webbing, is with this device that he's made. This is where we're all kind of full circle back to X-Men Origins Wolverine and the bone claws. In Sam Raimi's version of the Spider-Man movie, the writers and Sam Raimi and all these people decided that, he's Spider-Man. He doesn't need web cartridges. He was bit by a radioactive spider. He has the spider sense. He can shoot web from his hands. And I think the fans, nobody cared that it was a little bit different from the source material because it was an improvement. Lots of source material is not quite as good as what maybe the filmmakers do with it, believe it or not. I know we're always taught to believe that the book is always better, but look at Old Boy, which is a movie out of South Korea from 2003, also based on a comic book. Most people would agree that the movie really is a lot better than the comic book. One of the other changes that the original X-Men movie made was it's a very youthful understanding of kind of comics and powers. Everything had a blast. Magneto had a magnetic blast. Iceman had an ice blast. Cyclops had an optic blast. Banshee could scream, but it really worked like a blast. Everything was a blast. One of the things that the X-Men movie did, that Bryan Singer directed, was to further specify the mutant powers. Magneto could just control metallic objects. Things were lifted up and put back down. Jean Grey, didn't have a force field or blast or anything like that. She, just could telekinesis. She could move objects. I think that was also an example of a change, from the comics that really is, it really is better, especially for an audience for these comics that's growing up. We're a lot of us are in between 20 and 30 now, and we're going to see these movies. We're not going to fall for the same stuff that we did when we were in between 10 and 20. So I think that while the bone claws are not the movie's fault, it's again something that came from Marvel. The movie is partially at fault because it didn't take the opportunity to just improve upon the franchise, which is what Spider-Man did, which is what a lot of other superhero movies have done. In fact, most superhero movies have taken some sort of liberty that sort of makes the whole franchise a little bit better. You're noticing that I'm totally dorking out right now, and I'm talking about characters and about powers and all the things like that. I am going to talk a little bit about plot later, but I feel that right now, because these are such character-driven movies and because that's what, fills the seats, people want to see these characters, it's really very, very central to these X-Men movies, I think. I do want to talk even a little bit more about characters. Some of the other characters that appeared in the film also, in my opinion, were changed. Some maybe for the better and some for the worse. Gambit is a good example.